Hello there, and welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm joined by Mike Celestino from the Who's the Bossk podcast to just re examine Rogue One in the aftermath of Andor Season 2. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. Another episode in the wake of Andor this week. Here, we're looking ahead after the events of Andor in this episode, and looking at how we reevaluate and reexamine, recontextualize in some ways Rogue One, a Star Wars story, a film that is near and dear to many of our hearts, and I'll say, just to be honest, a truly awesome Star Wars film. And just good film overall. And of course, we have a brand new guest on the show this week. We have Mike Celestino from the Who's the Bossk podcast, and he's also the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars at Laughing Place. And it's a thrill to have him on the show because I'm a big fan of his work, but also I think this conversation that we have here today is really dives into a lot of the themes and thematic elements of the characters within Andor than we see in Rogue One, but also just a general overall aura of sacrifice that is done in the series that leads up to the events of Rogue One, and looking at how we just view the film differently with this different lens of context. So thrilled to have this conversation for you all here today. We do have one news item that I was able to discover over the last week here in the Star Wars and Lucasfilm adjacent galaxy. And frankly, it's a pretty cool one if you ask me. So from Dark Horse, there's going to be a sequel trilogy graphic novel that's going to be for all ages. It's written by Alessandro Ferrari, with feature art by Ingo Rumling, as well as additional art by Matteo Piana, Andrea Parisi, Davide Tirodi, with cover artist Eduardo Francisco, and lettering by Gruppo Edizioni BD. So this graphic novel will be coming on November 11th, and it will kind of coincide with the 10th anniversary of The Force Awakens, which is coming up very soon here in December. So I will certainly be doing some fun things around that coming up in the near future, and looking forward to celebrating that film, as well as we're currently also celebrating 20 years of Revenge of the Sith and all the cool stuff associated with that. So, folks, that is all the news that I had in this week's portion of the podcast. Well, let's get to our main topic discussion here and chat about all things Rogue One in the wake of Andor Season 2. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations, everybody. I don't know about you, but I certainly turned on Rogue One, a Star Wars story, after finishing Season 2 of Andor, a Star Wars story. And, I had a lot of different thoughts and opinions on that film, and just kind of a whole lot of different context with things. It made me watch it again with like a whole set of fresh eyes. And that's our topic of discussion here today, is recontextualizing and reevaluating Rogue One, a Star Wars story, knowing all the events of Andor and Andor Season 2 now. And of course, we have a guest here to chat all about this, and we have a brand new guest to Force Ghost Conversations. You may know him as the host of the Who's the Bossk podcast. He's also the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars at Laughing Place. We have Mike Celestino. Mike, welcome to Force Ghost Conversations, and how are you doing?
Hi, Anthony. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I'm always happy to talk Star Wars with anyone, and excited to talk about Rogue One with you.
Yes, me too. I'm thrilled to have this conversation here. And you just did this conversation on your own podcast, not to the time of recording this, folks. You did this a couple days ago. So this is a topic fresh in mind for us and a lot of Star Wars fans across the board. So it's nice to see a lot of podcasts diving into this topic and frankly, just giving Rogue One more time in the sun as it's approaching almost a 10-year anniversary here.
Yeah, when you reached out to me, I think I was writing the outline of my own episode about, revisiting Rogue One after the end of Andor, which I think it's occurring to a lot of people because obviously, as we're going to talk about, the end of the series leads right into the beginning of the movie. Plus, Tony Gilroy and Diego Luna kept saying, you're going to see Rogue One from a whole new light after Andor is over. So uh, I do want to say, like, it was a good way to fill in another episode's worth of content because the first season of Andor, obviously, was released much differently than
Hmm.
season 2, and we had, at least I got, I think, 10 episodes worth of discussion out of
Yes.
it, and this time it was down to just 4, so I got another episode's worth of, discussion about Andor and Rogue One this time around.
Yes, I also echo the same sentiment of the,
Yeah,
oh, it's nice to have another topic for another week without having to pull something out of the air and, contemplate that process.
exactly.
And also, I think the downside too is that this came out on the heels of Star Wars Celebration and
Right.
Light and Magic season 2 and Tales of the Underworld also
Yes.
very much dropped at the same time. So I think a lot of us podcasters are just like so much at once. And Gilroy was like, "Oh, I worry about the podcasters" when he talked about the 3
Yeah,
episode a night drop, but I don't think he also was aware of how close Celebration was on top of this, and Tales of the Underworld and Light Magic season 2 just coming at us all at
yeah.
once as fans of this. Now it's a great time to be a Star Wars fan, of course, and just a fan of this stuff, but for people covering this to great length and detail, it does add up.
Absolutely agreed, and yes, just I'm sure you're doing the same thing, but I'm catching up now. Obviously, I watched all this stuff when it came out, but next week I'm finally doing an episode about Tales of the Underworld, and
Hmm.
I think a couple weeks thereafter I'll do, Light and Magic season 2, but I wanted to spread it out a bit because
Right.
after that, there's gonna be a big gap. I think we have
Hmm.
Visions Volume 3, Star Wars Visions
Yeah.
Volume 3 in the
October, I
fall,
think. Yeah.
October, but except for that, there's not a whole lot on the visual media, like, there's no animation or live action until The
Yep.
Mandalorian and Grogu and next May. There's stuff coming from the publishing side, so we'll have the High Republic and other stuff to talk about, but, yes, we are gonna have kind of a dry spell, a little bit before the big movie comes out next year.
Yes, back to the days of like 2016, where a full episode was devoted to like analyzing action figures and Lego release sets to like mine for details that could potentially be in a movie.
Right.
Well, awesome. And it's so great to have you on the show here today. And we're going to start with just basically just some thoughts on Andor season 2 itself here.
Yeah.
Now that the Andor era is officially finished here, in a sentence or two, what was your reactions to the season overall?
I loved it overall, I thought it was great. I think it actually improved for me on rewatch. I
Mm,
think
okay.
because I had the early screeners that got sent out, I
Right.
crammed it all, and I think I watched the whole season in 2 days,
Yeah,
and,
how do you not?
um, I think I was a little lost about a couple of things, and
Mhm.
it took me, I think, the 3rd time through, some stuff started to really click for me. I was like, "Oh, that's what's
Sure.
happening here. This is why that character did that." So, I think it definitely would have benefited from, again, having it spread out, having the release schedule spread out a little bit, but,
Agreed.
yeah, I think it's wonderful, especially, gosh, everyone's saying this, of course, but the the Gorman massacre is just incredible. The
Mhm.
whole Mon Mothma speech episode is amazing, and then all the stuff leading directly into the movie, I think they handled that so well.
Yeah. I agree on all these fronts here. I think the release schedule was tough.
Yeah.
I think especially for podcasters, right? I feel like if I was just a person watching this uh and didn't discuss it at all, just went to bed afterwards, right? Especially here on the East Coast, it was rough. I'll say
Yeah.
that 9 o'clock 3 episode up till almost midnight was tough getting up the
Right.
next morning regularly for that. So I feel like just frankly, some of these episodes were so dense and full of so much information and just things that I just wasn't able to I agree with you. Like, I feel like I didn't fully understand things, and then because of the schedule, where it's like, holy cow, another set of 3 episodes is coming out next week.
Yeah.
I got to be on I got to schedule my guests. I got to talk to them almost the next day or so after that. I don't have time to rewatch this like I would
Yeah.
like a Bad Batch episode or something like that. So I'm just going off of one viewing, some notes I scribbled to get down while thinking through it and at work the next day contemplating things and then talking about it. And then the next set of episodes come out. And I don't really have time to really reflect on what I just saw. So now we get that space. The onslaught of Andor in a way hit us,
Yes.
and now we can like relax and rewatch things and listen to other podcasts and folks that were able to rewatch things a few times. And I echo all that sentiment there. It's interesting. Yeah. Um, how was it watching it the first time through, basically binging it in 1 to 2 days, like you said, and then just like being a full watch of it, and then you're like, okay, let's rewatch this again here. I feel like that might have been super helpful along the way.
I it was helpful. I will say, like, the second arc of 3 episodes played poorly for me that first time through.
Got
Again, I
it.
think that was the one that the plotting is a little more convoluted than the
Hmm.
others, maybe. It's not as straightforward, and there are
Sure.
things, again, little plot twists and narrative decisions in that didn't quite click for me that first time through, and I remember,
Hmm.
ending that first day of watching the screeners thinking, "Uh-oh, like, is this season not gonna be as good as season 1?" And then, of course, the back half of the season is incredible, but then when I rewatched that second arc, I loved it, actually, like, again,
Yeah.
once it made sense to me, I totally got it. So I don't think it necessarily benefited from the binging of it, but I couldn't help
Hmm.
myself at the same time, and I had to do it for my job as
Also
well,
true.
was writing the recaps and everything, so, yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing that if you're coming to the show for the first time. In fact, maybe first-time viewers can come and space it out, however they feel most comfortable and beneficial to them.
Yeah, that might be, yeah, that's a great advice for the future Andor watchers, right?
Yeah.
Give yourself like a week, space these things out, digest it, ingest it,
Yes.
whatever the Rhydonium is, just ingest it and have your day with it, and then move on to the next one, and just fully feel like you're ready to move on when you're ready for it, right? Rather than
Yes.
being like, I gotta get these in before the internet spoils me on this matter here.
Right.
And I can't be at work tomorrow and not scroll Twitter and see something. I gotta know what happens. And then
Yeah.
for a lot of people, I feel like it was just a lot. And I don't think they'll ever do this again. I know there was like they got to submit it's got to be in by a certain date for the Emmys
Yeah.
consideration, and they're very much gunning for that type of prestige television approach with this series.
Yeah.
So I understand the behind the scenes reasons. I think it also they fit together logically, these 3 episodes at a time. In a better world, if I'm in charge, 12 weeks, man. We get a full summer of Andor here. Just
That would have been
every
great, the
Tuesday, we
summer
just
of
get a little more
Andor.
depressed with some Andor. Yeah. So we're already into the Andor discussion here, folks, and we're going to get into our Rogue One analysis here. So the events of Rogue One or Andor lead directly right into Rogue One. At least the finale of Andor leads directly right into it. So did you expect the ending to be so seamless, especially kind of being told that this was going to happen? But did you expect it to be the way that it played out as we actually saw it in the series?
Well, my answer was going to be yes, because I had seen Tony Gilroy say that so many times, but you just kinda
Yeah.
hinted at that we were told many times by Tony Gilroy at convention appearances and other interviews
Yeah,
that
he was like, "Get ready."
yeah, the end of season 2 is gonna it's gonna be Cassian leaving for that mission on the Ring of Kafrene. So, yes, I was expecting that. As far as how seamless it was, yeah, I think, again, just kinda based on what he said, I think the thing that surprised me, little things surprised me here and there
Hmm.
about the very ending, like, "Oh, I didn't know K2SO went on that mission with him." Like, we didn't know that from the
Sure.
movie because
Yeah.
you don't see K2 the first scene that we see
Yeah. He's with the
Cassian.
ship.
Right, he's but yeah, stay back on the ship. Yeah, exactly. And just the circumstances surrounding it, obviously, we didn't know all the backstory and the reasons, and the fact that Cassian actually had some of this information already about
Hmm.
the Empire building this weapon of mass destruction, that this was kind of the second source that's, like, corroborating the
Yes,
information
confirming.
that he
Right.
got from Luthen, yeah.
And as
That
soon as
was
he says like
surprising.
Urso, Urso,
Yes. Galen Erso? Yeah.
yeah, that guy. Um, yeah, it's super helpful when Tony Gilroy is very much on the press trail, being like, "It's gonna be, you're gonna see Rogue One, and it's gonna lead right into it."
Yeah.
And for me, I think I was like, okay, well, what does that really mean, Tony? Are we going? And basically, we got the slow epic walk to the U-wing that was going
Yes.
to lead us eventually to the events. And I was like, oh, are we actually going to see Andor Cassian walk into like that back corner alley, and then there's
Mm,
Tivik? Like, are we going to see that from a different angle or something like
right.
that? Nope, doesn't turn out that way. It just says, hey, go to Kafrene, go check out this Tivik guy keeps calling us and leaving voicemail messages. You better go check in on this thing. It may be tied to this. So it's nice knowing a little bit more of the like the urgency and the why behind that. And that first meeting I've always really enjoyed in this in Rogue One, because it does give us the sense of like, okay, there's something going on here. What do they know about this thing? It doesn't seem like they know the full details, and then of course leads to the Urso, the cargo pilot, all that detail, and then frankly the murder of Tivik there. Uh, as Cassian can't get out, or he needs to get out. He needs
Yes.
to make sure the message lives on, and
Right.
Tivik could be, it could ruin everything if Tivik gets captured.
Yep.
So just to have the more detail in that, I'm glad that this ending is seamless. I'm glad that it fits for an ending to Andor itself too.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't need to go straight into Rogue One. You can take a pause and maybe sit with it for a few weeks and be satisfied with the ending on its own here. But it also is like, hey, you lead
Yeah.
right into that. It's almost like how seamless Rogue One then is to A New Hope,
Yes.
which is a wonderful through line across the entirety of those three properties.
The other thing I would say too is we get that nice moment with the Force healer character watching
Yeah, yeah,
Cassian walk toward the Ewing and knowing that she kind of had this vision of him having this destiny and going off, he has someplace to be. And Cassian's been told that, and he doesn't quite believe it, but then also
right.
the healing works on his shoulder. So does he kind of believe that a little bit as well as he walks toward that destiny? So yeah, there's that added weight going into Rogue One too.
I agree, and I think it's very poignant that they make a point to show that, right?
Yeah,
And especially as he's going into these events, he's going to Jeddah, the holy city, a place where it's strong in the Force, according to canon. There's the Guardian Temple there. There's the Kyber crystals there, and he's going to spend large part of the next couple of days here with Chirrut and Baze, who are guardians of the Wills, and especially Chirrut's going to be talking about the Force all the time.
yeah,
And just to see that with that added context there of like, well, Cassian is not really big on the Force and all that, but he's kind of like, those side eyes that he gives within the movie when they're talking about the Force. I'm like, oh, he's thinking about some things there that weren't really fully contextualized beforehand here.
yeah. Agreed.
So, as the co lead of Rogue One, we now have so much more context about Cassian Andor's journey to being a rebel leader. So, how do you examine this character differently in the movie now? Let's start with that question.
Well, obviously we know where he came from originally. We have that, his youth on the planet Canary. We have his uh, adopted family that we know about.
Mm
We know about how he wound up with the Rebel Alliance, and all the twists and turns therein.
hmm. Mm hmm.
I think, as far as like what aspect of his history adds to the depth of Cassian's sacrifice, like I think he sees all the people that have sacrificed themselves before him,
Mm hmm.
and he knows that those sacrifices were made for the betterment of the galaxy and for the benefit of the Rebel Alliance as a
Yeah.
whole. So
Yeah.
he is willing to do that. He also, we also know that he lost the love, who he considers the love of his life, kind of walked away from him. And I do think it's in the back of his mind, like, will I ever get to see Bix again? Will we
Mhm.
ever be reunited? And we, as the audience, know, watching Andor, because it was released after Rogue One, we know he's not
Yeah.
going to be reunited with Bix. So
Right.
there is that added tragedy to the whole thing, that he has a child out there, and he has his love out there, but there is a little bit of hope there as well, in that the child will
Mhm.
carry on that tradition, and Bix will hopefully um, give the child whatever Cassian had that made him such a noble character too.
Right. Yeah, you see the sacrifice, and just like that Force healer kind of said, and Vix kind of
Yeah,
said to a degree too, is like you're picking up these like stories along the way. You're the messenger of these like various stories of things. And I think that is like a great thesis to this character that the show developed, that then ultimately leads to the greatest message that he ever gets out, which is the Death Star plans themselves.
right, right.
He is so pivotal in that those plans don't get out if he doesn't take out Krennic there at the end, or at least shoot him down to the point where he's immobile to stop them, and then
Hmm.
send out the message through the big satellite that goes up to Admiral Radis's ship there. And it's
Right.
just it adds so much to this guy that he's been in all these places. Like he's like
Right.
it almost is like wow, like Jedda's nothing. Like he has this swagger about him where he's not concerned and worried about going into all these places because he's
Yeah.
survived all these incredible events leading up to this.
Right.
Narkina 5, like that alone
Yeah.
is enough confidence builder. That Aldani, the Gorman massacre, like he's one of the few survivors of that instance to tell the tale. Uh, and then to Coruscant underneath the little nose of the Empire itself there and the ISB, and it's like, man, this guy, this is an earned confidence here that he has in Rogue One. Like, no wonder he's walking around and he's this leader and he's this captain running
Yeah.
around knowing everything and being involved in these big meetings with these high key players of the council. And we see him in Andor literally talking to them directly and yelling at them and being like, you guys, like Luthen was big. We're not here without Luthen.
Yeah.
I think this adds so much to this character that like I don't think I ever anticipated when they announced this show in like 2018, 2019 about like where this could potentially lead to and what are the long-term implications of this show. And this is it right there. This is just added depth to the understanding of this
Yes.
character that then makes the ultimate sacrifice like many of the people before him. um and also like what you were alluding to, I think, is like, you know, he saw all those people pass along the way, the sacrifices they made for these big moments in the history of the rebellion. And then he says to Bix too, like, my luck's running out. Like, I only got so many times, and that's kind of why he's like, I don't want to
Yeah.
keep doing this to some degree, because I keep getting put in these dangerous situations, and eventually I'm gonna get hit by something here. Like, I got this wound on the back that's not healing. Eventually these wounds aren't going to heal, and like,
Mhm.
I want to live. I want to live a life here. I want to, send me back to Niamos and live on the beach.
Yeah, you have to wonder there at the very end of Rogue One when the Death Star's blast has hit the ocean out there by the Scarif, whatever the
Oh
city is
yeah.
called in Scarif, where they're keeping the
The
plants.
Citadel, I think, is it
Yeah,
called?
the
Yeah.
Citadel, right? And that huge wave is coming at them. You have to wonder if what's going through his mind there. And going back to, yeah, kind of like what you were alluding to, the speech that Luthen gives him before he sends him in to get Mon Mothma out of the Senate, and he's listing off all those events that he's
Yeah.
lived through, which kind of reflects what the Force healer was saying about have you kind of have this place to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit too, it's almost too coincidental that you have made it this far. And I think he knows that as well. And I think in that moment there at the end, it is kind of a realization for him, like, oh yeah, this is what all this has led to at this point.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty big deal. Seeing that voice healer, I'd
Yeah.
be like, "Oh no, that's not good juju. This
Right.
isn't good to see. This the force is working in a mysterious way here. This, I don't know about this one. I just water my plants, man. I wasn't thinking about this here. Oh, and I also just thought too, after just saying Niamos, like he's looking for that beach, and then ultimately is
Oh
is
yeah.
is is ended on a beach.
Right.
Like, oh
I
man,
had not made that connection, but yes.
that is some dark poetic work here done by Andor. Again,
Yeah.
because we have the inner context now, we get this.
Yes.
But we also get more context about a lot of other key characters in Rogue One and the original trilogy too that are based within this. So let's examine a few of those characters that we know are in this. So, for example, Melshi, Mon Mothma, Draven, K2SO, Krennic. These are just a few. I'm sure there's many more that I could ponder on.
Yeah.
So, how do you feel now when you see them in Rogue One? And is there any character specifically who's been elevated, in your opinion, due to Andor now?
I'll go through these one by one here, and I'll say,
Sure, do it.
Melshi, when I watched the movie this week, it struck me actually how little screen time Melshi has. He's
Very
not,
little. He was.
he's kind of just a rebel grunt in this
Yeah,
movie. And they
yeah,
Cassian does call him by name, but you don't really, at least I didn't get any sense of like a bigger bond between those two characters. Like, I didn't foresee, or the opposite of foresee because it was in the past. I didn't
yeah,
foresee that they were going to be depicted, hanging out together, playing cards with K2SO, that
yeah.
kind of thing,
Hanging
or
out in the
that,
frat house, basically.
yeah, or that, that Cassian would have met him in this really stressful situation on Narkina 5 where they were both escaped from the prison together. He just really seemed like, oh, this kind of almost background rebel
Yeah,
grunt
yeah.
character. So we do get a lot more context from Melshi, and I don't know if it necessarily even really pays off in the movie. It's
It's
He's
true.
just kind of there.
Just like, hey, it's
Then
Melchi.
yeah. As far as Mon Mothma goes, this is a character that was very like one note the first time we met her in Return of
Very
the
much so.
Jedi, and then she was supposed to be in Revenge of the Sith, and her scenes got cut, and then they brought this actress back, Genevieve O'Reilly, just basically because she looked like the actress who
The
played
great
her
deep cut. Yes.
in Return of the Jedi. I keep misspeaking there, but uh, what an amazing actress she turned out to be, Genevieve
Yeah.
O'Reilly. And I'm sure
Yeah.
big part of that is the writing and the direction, but she's so wonderful and she brought so much to that role that, yes, of course, it adds, you get an amazing amount of backstory for her going into Rogue One. And it
Mhm.
does add a tremendous amount of weight, I think, into her scenes, both in Rogue One and Return of the Jedi, I think.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
this is a character that was prevalent in the expanded universe and all the novels there, and
Yep.
then now also in the books and comics, in the current canon too. So Mon Mothma, I think there's still a lot of room to explore there. I wouldn't be surprised. We've already seen her pop up in Ahsoka, but I wouldn't be surprised if she's still around in The Mandalorian and Grogu. Obviously, we know her character is still alive, but will
Yeah.
she pop up there? She could pop up in Ahsoka season 2. I don't think we're done seeing Genevieve O'Reilly playing Mon Mothma, which is a great thing because I think she's
And as a side
wonderful.
note, I hope we don't see the end of her either.
Yeah, yeah, me too. General Draven, I do think we learned a little bit more about his dynamic with the rest of the Rebel Alliance, like
Mhm.
leadership in Andor. And actually, I was talking about this on my podcast the other day with my guest about whether it gave us a little bit of new context to the scene where he gives Cassian the order to kill Galen Erso instead
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
just capturing him. And we were trying to decide whether or not Draven was acting with, in agreement with and with the approval of the rest of the Rebel Council there, or if he was acting on his own. Do you have an opinion about that, Anthony?
Yeah. So I don't think he was. I don't think he was acting in the. I think this would be one of those gray areas where it's like,
Yeah,
well, he just didn't make it. Right. We tried everything we could, and then like
right.
they said with K2SO, right? Well, this is not the official story here. We will fudge the report here. You weren't out. This didn't happen. Right. So I think like he admits to it later on, right? With was it the sending of Blue Squadron to
Uh-huh.
Edu, right? He's like,
That's
well,
right.
who approved this? And it's like, well, someone had to do it,
That's
right?
right.
So like he's very much of the mind of like, I'll do what kind of needs to be done here, wink, wink. Even though we're all like, oh, how dare Luthen be this kind of guy? Even though he's kind of taking that role on Yavin to be
Right.
the person that's willing to get their hands a little dirty.
And it doesn't seem like Mon Mothma or Bail Organa or the others would sign off on this like execution, basically. So
No, I don't think they would either. No, it doesn't
yeah.
align. The way that my Mothma looked when she saw a person die in front of her, like she
Right.
was not prepared to call out executions.
Yeah. Moving on to K2SO. This is kind of a touchy subject for me. If you listen to my
Hmm.
podcast, I think we got into this quite a bit because we did have this comic book, and I'm such a fan of the whole franchise, and I loved this idea that everything mattered. There were, the comics, the
This little
novels.
thing,
Hey, you have it right there.
of
That's
course.
amazing. Yeah. So I bought that when it came out. I didn't think it was great or anything, but I do
Yeah,
feel like the plan, as I was told it, the plan was to have everything count. And now we've gotten to the point where, the publishing side of Lucasfilm, it's canon until it's not, basically, until
yeah, yeah,
animation
yeah.
or live action overwrites it, which kind of bugs me a little bit. At the same time, we were promised, and Tony Gilroy has talked about this a lot in interviews recently too. The original pitch for Andor as a series was like a buddy comedy almost between
Yeah.
Cassian and K2SO. When they first announced the show, it was Diego Luna and Alan Tudyk out on the stage at
D23,
D23
2019.
Expo.
Yep.
Exactly. So I was expecting way more K2SO in Andor, and
Yep.
especially in season 2, when I got those screeners, I was like, every episode is like, is this gonna be the one where K2
Yeah.
shows up?
Is this week? Is this
Um,
week it?
and he's only in 3 episodes of the entire series, which is
Hmm.
shocking, to
Three in
me.
like 3 seconds.
Well, 2 and 3 seconds, because he's not in
Right.
the
That's exactly right
third to
too.
last episode at all.
Yeah.
But I was disappointed by that. I understand why they did it, and I think probably when I rewatch it in 5, 10 years, I'm gonna agree with this decision
Mhm.
wholeheartedly, and I think it
Mhm.
probably plays best this way. And I've heard Gilroy's reasoning behind it and why it's difficult to write scenes with K2SO in them. But I don't know. Expectations can really weigh things down for me, and it's true for everybody. I think that was
Right,
so
right.
much of like the problems with Last Jedi, the reaction to the Last Jedi,
Mhm. Sure.
expectations
Sure.
kind of spoil things a little bit. So I think upon future rewatches, again, I'm going to get more and more used to, oh, we don't meet K2SO until like the final arc, basically.
Your anxiety of waiting for, like, is it this week? Is this
Yeah.
gonna happen yet? And then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I can cool down. I know it's not gonna happen for a while yet.
As far as Krennic goes, I saw some comment the other day about how Krennic is way more like flamboyant in the series than he was in the movie. I don't know if I agree with that, but I definitely had a
Yeah, I
lot of
don't agree with that
fun.
either. I think he's pretty straightforward, flamboyant esque throughout.
Yeah. Gosh, well, so every scene that Ben Mendelsohn was in Andor is so compelling, and like all of his choices, the stuff with pressing down on Dedra's head and like
Yeah,
holding her,
that
that
improv
scene
moment
is so
too. Apparently.
intense. Yeah, apparently. I don't know if it really changed my perception of his character, though. I had read the Catalyst novel, which gives you a lot
Another
more,
good one. Yeah.
yeah, information about Krennic and the Urso family. But he's pretty consistent. He doesn't really have, he's not one of those Star Wars villains that gets to have a redemption arc. He's pretty much
Nope. Nope.
a bad guy through and through, and a pretty despicable one at that. But yeah, so much fun to watch him. And I feel bad that I didn't let you chime in on any of that. Anthony, did you want to give your thoughts on any of those characters?
Well, I'm more than happy to, and I did want to talk about you brought it up, the K2SO, the Cassian comics story,
Yeah,
which I don't know if I can perhaps help the thought process behind that, but
yeah,
I did hear another podcast basically say, like, well, because they said like this is not the official story here.
yeah.
Draven saying like, okay, well then this becomes the story that they write for why they
Right.
see Cassian and K2 walking about this when they're on Yavin 4 and people ask, well, why is this Imperial droid here? Oh, well, because that's off the books here. We'll tell you this story here, and that's how it works. So,
Was that
not the
Star
best
Wars
way.
Explained?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Alex pontificated
yeah,
on that one, and I was like, yeah, okay, well, it works. It works. It's the best that we got.
yep,
I'll take it. It's just
sure.
very similar to, I think, like how people are having to like do some like back, some front flips about the Mon Mothma speech to some degree too.
Right.
With that we see her after the events on Gorman, that we do see in Rebels too. To some degree, so it's like, okay, is
That's
it
a
when she
This is kind
changed
of
outfits and all?
tangential.
Yeah.
Yes. Just to go off on a quick tangent about that, if you go and watch that Rebels episode, because we watched it when that episode came out on Disney Plus, we watched what's the title of the one where she leaves the Senate? It's not
Oh,
Who Are You? It's the one after it.
yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it too. Sorry.
Welcome to the Rebellion. Welcome to the
Oh yeah,
Rebellion
of course. It's probably
was
the
the
easiest
title.
episode to remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we went right into uh Secret Cargo, I
Secret
think was the
Cargo.
title.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's fairly consistent. Like you said, the speech is different. The biggest like glaring difference though is that Bail Organa is already at Yavin. Like you see
Yeah.
a
He took
shot
a
of him.
big, quick flight.
Even after that whole thing about how it's not time for him to go yet. Anyway, we'll get back to Rogue One.
He's just having a vacation there on Yavin as a quick
Yeah,
detour,
right,
not a
right,
not a
right.
long
Just
term stay at this point.
consulting. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I do like the added context of the K2SO birth answer that we got here, just because how it ties
Mhm.
into the loss of Bix, right? And that's literally Cassian finding out that Bix is gone, and then K2 is introduced into his life, and it adds a bit more to that relationship of like why they're so together, buddy cop like. And it's like, oh, it's because he immediately filled or seemingly filled that void that
Yeah,
was left by her.
right.
So I think, okay, that makes so it not necessarily makes sense, but it's interesting. That's an interesting thing to chew on, so to speak. Um, it is funny about the Melshi thing. I do agree.
Yeah.
Like, okay, in watching this, like if you watch it in chronological order now, which I think a lot of people do when they watch Star Wars nowadays,
Yeah.
they go straight through all the canon stuff as it builds on each other all the way through. And you at that point you'll just be like, "Oh, okay, that's cool. That's Melshi right there." After seeing this, I feel like it'll be a lot more for the person. Mean it will mean a lot more for the person going the other way through versus seeing Rogue One and then watching it and be like, "Is that guy that kind of has like 1 second of
Uh,
screen time and is on the comms for a second asking about a master switch?"
yeah.
um, so I like it. It just adds a little bit more to the fun of like, okay, the Rogue One experience. Okay, they were on a prison together and they got out and they was like, we gotta tell the story. And then like, oh, like the funniness of the grand reveal and like what was that episode 2 or 3 of the third arc or something like that, I think, where Melshi appears and it's like, whose weapon is this? It's like,
Uh-huh.
it's mine. It's like, oh, it's just Melshi. Okay, they made him make out to be this grand character that
Yes.
exists in the Star Wars universe when ultimately he's just kind of like another background guy. They got a few scenes and sequences here.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Um, I think Mon Mothma is probably the one that I get the most out of, just because
Yeah.
she is arguably the character, second protagonist of the series in many ways. I think the speech is so eloquently written about the events on Gorman that she does, and that just the tension of that episode is spectacular too. Um, and of course, knowing like she had a family and the loss of that family, that's the sacrifice that she has to make, the loss of her friend Tay Coleman, just all that just it's a big theme of this the story overall. Andor is the sacrifices need to be made in order to achieve a revolution, a rebellion. To make these things happen, is you got to cut things off along the way in order to focus purely on the thing at hand. And for her, that was her family. Now, of course, if interesting family dynamics meant that maybe it was probably an easier decision overall than like it wasn't the gut
Yeah.
wrenching choice, arguably, perhaps, marrying off her daughter. She's off who knows where. And then Perrin necessarily wasn't the best arranged marriage spouse either, so it just adds more interesting things to
Yeah.
it. I don't know if it's necessarily like what one would expect, where it's like, oh no, she's leaving her family, that's terrible, but it's more like, okay, I guess she's just gonna leave her family, and
Yeah.
that's kind of, I'm okay with that. Go join the rebellion and have Vel there, and just enjoy the time on Yavin 4 and create your new family out there. Like, you can devote more time to being that.
I have to ask you, have you read the Mask of Fear novel yet?
I have not yet. No, I'm so excited to get into
Yeah.
that. Full disclosure, I'm going to Germany on holiday in a few
Okay.
weeks here. So I have this like huge stack of like German history books that I've been reading over the last like couple of months here, just in preparation for that. So I'm a good tourist going around and pointing things out and just embracing the
Yeah.
experience. So like my, of course, then when that happens, my Star Wars book pile then piles up on the other side of things. So like
Yeah.
all the recent Phase 3 High Republic stuff has been piling up, and then of course Mask of Fear, and I know there's some other things coming up in the next couple of weeks. So it's just going to add to that. So once I get back in the early part of July, then it's like diving into
Okay.
that fun stuff. I know there's some great Mon Mothma and Perrin stuff
Yes.
in Mask of Fear. I can't wait
This
to
is
dive into.
I've been recommending everybody who loved Andor, this is the next thing that you should consume. Go back and I mean, this just came out a few months ago, but go read Star Wars Reign of the Empire: The Mask of Fear by Alexander Free is
Part
the full
one
title.
of the
Yes.
trilogy.
Uh, it's great. It's takes place immediately after the rise of the Empire, like right post Order 66, post Emperor Palpatine declaring himself
Hmm.
ruler of the galaxy, and it's all about Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and sort of Saw Gerrera, but really from the perspective of a crew member on Saw's crew, and about how they're all their first initial reactions to the empire coming into
Yeah,
power,
yeah.
and the very very initial seeds of the rebel alliance being planted. So that's it connects directly to Andor, so highly recommended.
Well, a wonderful connection to Andor, and also,
Yeah.
we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith too, which is a
Yep.
neat little like throughway
Yeah.
between those stories as well. It's all one
Right.
connected universe, everybody.
Yep.
And we've alluded to this a little bit here, but obviously one of the major themes of Andor is the sacrifice needed in order to make rebellions possible. So therefore, a few characters sadly do not make it through the end of this series, but their impact can be still felt resonating within Rogue One. So, which character's sacrifice do you think was the most influential for this stage of the rebellion?
The first one that comes to mind is Luthen, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah, I think that's fair.
and Cassian keeps saying, like you quoted before, none of this would be here on Yavin for if not for Luthen. And I think they made it pretty clear that the Rebel Alliance as it stands doesn't really want to follow the same strategies as Luthen did, even though he
No,
was instrumental in putting it all together. So you definitely feel his impact there, as he said in season one, like planting the seeds of a garden that you'll never get to see. I don't remember the
a
exact quote,
sunrise
but
will never see and all
so
that. Yep.
yeah, that's right. That's yeah. It's a different metaphor, same same meaning.
Sure.
But yeah, Luthen, and then everyone. I don't want to. It wouldn't just be the leadership either. It would also be those on the ground, like Cinta, Kaz, and Brasso.
Hmm.
Basically, anybody who lost their life in the service of this cause. Uh, I think everything meant something, and everyone learned something from those deaths,
Yeah.
even if it wasn't directly impactful on the end of the empire eventually. But it all mattered, I think. I
Sure.
would say, yeah,
Sure. It all adds up on each other. I mean, you can even
yeah.
argue Marva in season one,
Oh,
right? She's
definitely
the
Marva,
catalyst
definitely
that
Marva.
starts everything. you,
Yes,
you
that's a
don't
great
have
point.
you don't have the events of A New Hope if Marva Andor doesn't stay
Yeah,
on Ferrix and die there and then become a brick that then
yeah. I didn't
becomes the
think of
thing
Marva
to
because
start.
Marva dies of natural causes. She doesn't die from a blaster shot or anything. But yeah, that whole her whole self eulogy at
Yeah.
her
And
funeral.
her
Gosh, it's
choice to be like, "Hey, I'm dying here
yeah,
on Ferrix. Like, I'm
yes,
I'm not gonna let the heat on. I'm gonna die eventually here, and my death will be used to martyr this cause forward." And then because that Deidre, loses her job and is put on the Gorman case.
yep. And like you said, the brick literally, she's turned into a brick, and that brick is used to smash the helmet of the stormtrooper or whatever. So, yeah, great point. Love it.
Yeah, I think Luthen is definitely the. I think if you ask Gilroy, if he would say Luthen Rail,
Yeah,
I think number two, perhaps underneath that, you might say Lonnie Young, right? The guy that
right.
kind of got that information out, and
Yeah,
unfortunately is much like Tivik, taken out by Luthen right then and there.
yeah,
It's an asset that if said one thing, or it's hard to get him out, or he had no intention of frankly getting him out to Yavin,
right.
and all of that. And would he have been accepted in Yavin? I don't know. It seems like it's dicey. At least for Clea, she's like, I don't know if I can trust these people around here. I wonder what Luthen was saying about what's going on in Yavin. uh,
Right.
so I think at least in my household, I think we're gonna always think about Lonnie Young every time we watch Rogue One here, as well as Luthen, and the definitely another character that also is like, well, I'm just living in constant stress and fear. And he had a wife and a child, and just constantly, I don't know if he ever like enjoyed the last 5 years of his life. Once
I
we
I
saw how much he was involved.
I would really like a Lonnie Young action figure. They haven't made enough cast Andor action figures, in my opinion, and Lonnie,
Yeah.
I think, would be a great one to have. But if they made him, I would want the little Tuca cat that finds his body.
Ooh,
Um,
yes. Very dark, but I'll take it.
yeah, yeah,
Star Wars is not afraid of doing like the weird action figures, like the
yeah.
burnt Vader body. I think is one that very much comes up in like some action figure searches I've done. I was like, okay, that's a choice.
Right. Yeah, you see every once in a while the meme of the Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru,
Oh
the
yes,
charred
that one too.
remains.
Yeah, yeah, of
Yeah,
course. Yeah, bring the the dead Lonnie body and the little cat. That'd be a really interesting one there, of course, too. Um, so at this point, both Jin and Cassian stories have been well fleshed out.
mhm,
Between Andor and thinking Rebel Rising, Catalyst 2, a couple episodes of Forces of Destiny 2. We know a lot about Jin, Urso, and Cassian now. So, are there
yeah.
any other characters from Rogue One, a Star Wars story, that you would like to learn more about?
So my answer is the Guardians of the Wills, although we have
Mm,
gotten there was
got that
one
little book, yeah.
little book It just wasn't enough for me. I want way more time
Okay.
with Chirrut Imwe and Baze Malbus. I love their characters so much, and I think they probably had some adventures before we met them, and even before that book took place. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. I would like to just yes, ending that if there's a story. I no, I haven't read Guardians of the Wills yet, so
Yeah.
unfortunately, I can't speak to what actually takes place in that one. So if what I propose here does, then that'd be great and interesting to check that out later on. But I know they mention in Rogue One that Baze Malbus was once the most like
Hmm.
devoted guardian of the Will. So I wonder, like, what was his crisis of faith? What made him lose his
Right.
interest in being this ardent religious person? I wonder what that story would be. Like, that could be a very interesting way to talk about those two characters even more.
Yeah, that would be great. It's been some years since I read it, and it's a real short little almost like novelette or whatever you would
Right?
call it.
Yeah.
There's a word
Yeah, I think
for
it's like
that.
even like a
Uh,
young adult story too. I don't even think that's like
yeah, yeah,
not even a young adult. I think it might be the what they call middle grade readers. Some of those early
yes,
High Republic books are called that. So I think it would
yeah.
fit that description more. I think.
So I don't remember exactly what went down in there. I feel like it had something. Just to guess the answer to your question, like I feel like his loss of faith probably had something to do with the the temple of the Kyber being like pillaged by the Empire.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, who knows? Even when it
right,
could have been 20 years, right?
could be,
Maybe
yeah,
Order 66 was it, right? He
that's
felt
true.
great pain across the
Yeah,
galaxy and was like, "Hey, I don't want to be
yeah,
a part of this no more." Or
yeah.
yeah, he's right. They are destroying this temple that I enjoyed and loved and defended and supported. Now I have to pick up this big gun and defend everything. What drives a religious man to then pick up the biggest gun in the galaxy?
Right. Do you have an answer? Do you have a character that you'd like to see fleshed out more?
I don't know if it's a character I need to see fleshed out more because I think that what they show in Rogue One really gets to the heart of it. But I would be interested to see what causes Bodhi Rook to want
Oh
to
yeah,
leave. Like, what's the thing that maybe he sees that he's like, I don't want to be a part of this empire anymore. Like, there had to be some catalyst event, I think, that
yeah,
he either saw an Edu or learned about. I think that could be a great maybe 3-part mini comic series or a short story.
right.
Maybe even a Star Wars Insider story. It doesn't have to be a full on novel, 300
Yeah,
pages, or a TV series or anything like that. I think just a maybe even a a one shot comic could do it. But just some more Bodhi Rook. I think he might be the only character in Rogue One, main character that hasn't had some sort of ancillary
right.
story written about him
I
or
do have
added
his
in some
action
way.
figure though.
Hey, the Bodhi Rook, Bodhi lives.
Yeah.
If he's
I
brave, he can do anything.
I was sort of half expecting Bodhi to show up in season 2, like near the end.
That
Maybe
would have been
get a
great.
little taste of him and his interaction with Galen Erso. I asked my guest this week if he would have wanted to see that, and he was like, no, he didn't think any of the other
Wow.
characters that didn't carry over. He said it would have felt extraneous to have any others carry
Yeah,
over. I think from the movie.
I think I agree with that based off
Yeah.
of what we got, right? I feel like in the four arcs, right? 3 episode arcs.
Yes.
There just isn't the time really to devote to introducing another kind of side story quest in those kind of things. I feel like they were very focused in the story being told here. Now, if we had gotten the original 5 season 12 episode, 10 to 12 episode,
Yeah.
perhaps there's more space to then introduce a Bodhi in a couple scenes here.
Right.
um, and that would have been perfectly apt for it. And I think Tony Gilroy's been very honest about budget this season, more so than I think any creative has ever been honest about budget. And he's like, hey, it costs money to get some of these actors here. And it
Yeah.
just, that's why we can't, that's their answer for Jimmy Smits and why we couldn't get him back and scheduling and all that stuff. And just,
Yeah.
there's real logistics to producing these kind of things. So maybe in the five, in the alternate timeline exists that has the 5 season arc that we originally promised with this show. that fifth season we get some more Bodhi time, and you see the Galen Urso interactions. You see Krennic on Edu, and seeing how
Yeah,
they interact with each other and all that stuff. I would love that. I would love that so much. Give me that. That adds to the story. You see, this is adding to the Bodhi story. Like he can
right.
see the Krennic and Galen Urso interactions. We get a little more of that backstory. Maybe we see Galen from an alternate point of view recording the message that he
Yeah.
sends to Jin. Oh, so good. Good
I
idea.
will say I did say this on my show, but I will say it again that I'm actually fairly relieved that they didn't stick to that 5-year plan because
Okay, sure.
I am pretty sure based on the state of the streaming industry right now, I don't think we would have gotten all 5 seasons. I think the show
Honestly,
would
very
have
true.
been canceled before the end. So I'm really, really glad they were able to finish it in this way.
No, I feel like the only show that gets to finish its story is Stranger Things, and that
Right.
took that took almost 10 years to get.
Yeah.
We're four, three presidents since the start of that
Yes.
show. So
Right.
who knows if it's not like it used to be where it was like 1 year a season, the next season comes out and all that
Yeah.
stuff, right? It's these big production things that take 2 to 3 years to produce now.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and also I think Diego would be pushing later 60s perhaps. I don't know his exact age. I think he's in his mid to late 40s now. So
Right.
who knows at the end of all things if they'd done that where he actually would end up, and just the questions of all the other side characters where they're at those times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it may not have been super feasible, honestly, at the end of the day. So I'm happy with what we got. It's ultimately
Me
the
too.
answer there. So finally, I get this question a lot from listeners. So I want to pose it to you. So Mike, for your thoughts here. So when a new Star Wars story is released, what is your approach to recontextualizing previously held notions of canon?
I'm all for recontextualization. I am
Hmm.
less happy about rewriting, which we've talked about
Okay. Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah.
But can you clarify what you mean by my approach to it?
Yeah. Like, are you like, do you find yourself like maybe like upset when you see like, oh, I have to rethink this now? Or are you like, okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I sit with it for a few days here, and you are come to like an acceptance of like, okay, this is how I view something differently here. So for example, let's say like the Obi-Wan and Maul thing, right, from
Yeah.
season 3 of Star Wars Rebels, to be like, first off, okay, Obi-Wan and Maul are going to meet uh 2 years before the events of A New Hope. So first off, Maul's still around, folks, at that time,
Yeah.
and the fact that he's meeting Obi-Wan on Tatooine and they have this interaction, and he talks about Luke, and then he says like, is he the chosen one, and then that whole conversation that they have, right? And I think for a lot of fans, I
Yeah.
was like, okay, that's a lot to digest and think about there. So when like an event like that is coming up, like, do you have any like particular approach to it, or are you just like, okay, I'm gonna let it just hit me here and see what happens, and then I'll think through things differently. Any thoughts on that?
It's a great question. I'm going to throw you a different example that probably
Okay,
impacted
sure.
me more
Got it.
because I was in my late teens when the prequel trilogy started coming out,
Okay.
and I had spent the better part of a decade. Let's see, the expanded universe really kicked off in like 91 when Heir to the Empire came out, right? So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was a big fan of all the Star Wars novels and comics from the 90s. And we had I'm an even bigger fan of the Star Wars bounty hunters. So
Great.
Boba Fett, as you probably know,
See,
had
another
his
answer.
whole this
Yeah.
whole history that was established in the expanded universe and a whole, different origin story. And then we get to the prequels, and George Lucas is like, no, let's forget all that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't
sure.
even know if he knew about it, to be honest. He probably just didn't
I
read
think he
any of
didn't
that
even
stuff.
care. Yep.
Yeah, and we get a new origin for Boba Fett, and I don't know if I'm even really over that now,
Hmm. Hmm.
25 years later.
Sure, sure.
But I will say, like, my philosophy on all of that is, Star Wars. There's an official Star Wars canon that Lucasfilm has.
Right.
There's also the expanded universe, like what they call Legends now
Yeah.
timeline. But then I think there's a third thing that applies to each fan as an individual, and that's your own like head canon, as they
Yeah.
would call
Mike's
it. And I
canon.
think, yeah, and I think that can be whatever you want it to be, and I think that actually fits with the Lucasfilm philosophy that I've heard like Pablo Hidalgo say, or members of the Lucasfilm story group. Like, it is from a certain point of view, you know? It is like
Absolutely.
these stories are all made up, so it can kind of be whatever you personally want it to be. And I do get frustrated when Lucasfilm overwrites parts of the established canon, because a big part of what I enjoy about being a fan is keeping track of all that and
Sure,
remembering, like,
sure.
oh, like I love when there's connections to the publishing in the live action stuff, like in
Hmm.
Ahsoka, when Thrawn remembered having met and hung out with Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that only happened in the novels. Like,
You're like, it's a
you
Thrawn
got,
Alliances reference.
yeah, you gotta, people watching the show have to go read a novel now to understand what he's talking about. Like, that made
Hmm.
me really, really happy. And I know
Yeah.
it makes some people unhappy when that happens. Like, oh, I have homework I have to do. No, like, I love the
You get to
interconnected
do it. It's good
nature.
homework. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love when I love when each little part of this interconnected tapestry that is Star Wars, each little part means something, and I don't
Hmm.
like when one little part gets discarded, because it got
Yeah.
overwritten by something else. So I like your, what you took from Alex and Molly Damon about the oh, now that's the cover story. So at least there's a, actually would be great if Lucasfilm like officially approved that as
That would be great.
the
I would love it too. Yeah.
explanation, like they did with when Tony Gilroy renamed his home planet, or when Cassian's home
Right.
planet
Right.
got
See, another
reestablished, and they,
answer. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. Does that answer your question?
It certainly does. No,
Okay.
I think that's exactly a healthy approach to things, and I think
Yeah.
the importance of headcanon is what kept fans going for all those
Right.
years, right? In the dark times, right, between Return of the Jedi and the Phantom Menace, and of course, there were many
Yeah.
legend stories and all that stuff, but a lot of people didn't read those stories and just enjoyed the movies, and then they're like, "Oh,
Right.
what could a prequel trilogy be like?" Or maybe they had read the Return of the Jedi
Yeah.
novelization, and they're like, "Oh, I know that there was like a volcanic thing that involved the creation of
Yeah.
Vader and Obi-Wan and all that stuff." And I think it's also important to some degree to, I 100% agree with you on like the importance of like, oh, I don't want, and like the tiers of canon, right? I think it's talked about a lot. All right, a
Yes.
movie comes
Yes.
out and then it overwrites something that was done in a book, and it's like, well, I spent 20 hours reading this book and dissecting it
Yeah.
and putting my sticky notes in here. So thanks for throwing all that out there and making me do all that, guys. Um, so I understand that, and also the time that the creator of whoever made that uh, book or comic or something like that, they put their time and effort into those things, folks. So I
Yes.
100% empathize with the pain of like, oh, it no longer quote unquote matters here. And I
Yeah.
think that's the important thing of as fans to decide, well, what is canon to me? And I think that just gets to the crux of like what Star Wars is as a whole. It's a mythology meant to teach us how to be better people. It is these people that are out in
Right.
this grand space, wacky space opera that are put in these instances of good and evil, and they're faced with decisions, and they make choices, and it allows us to see like, okay, they did that in that decision and it didn't work out for them. So if I'm put in an oddly similar instance where I'm forced to make a choice, then it allows me to like have some context of like, okay, it didn't work for them, maybe I do it this way and let's see how it works out here, and hopefully it works out and it teaches us to kind of just be better
Yeah.
human beings as a society overall. um, so I think it's important to debate how does this fit
Yeah.
into a larger story here and have these great
Yeah.
conversations. And I think it's important to, I think, sit with some of these concepts and think through it. And I frankly, I'll agree. I was disappointed to some degree, and I was like, man, it sucks that this comic people won't look at it anymore. Right? I feel like
Right.
if you go to or it'll become a novelty. You go to a comic shop. And you see it in the bins or something like that, and someone picks it out and like, oh, that's interesting. But I remember them meeting in this other way, and this doesn't make any sense anymore here. Um, so without, hopefully people listen to this podcast and listen to Star Wars Explained and
Yeah.
come to that conclusion here. um but yeah, it is just tough along the way, and this is a question that I get all the time, and I'm like, well, frankly, every time that something new Star Wars comes out, I have to sit down and go, well, whatever happens here, this could rechange how I look at everything.
Yeah.
Right. I think like, oh, a new Mandalorian episode is now out. Oh, it's the Mandalorian season 2 finale. Oh, Luke Skywalker's here. Right. Well,
Yeah.
you add this major character here. Now I have to think, okay, well, I next see him after this point in like live action canon is in The Last Jedi. So there's a lot of Luke Skywalker in between there now to make up
Right.
for when he eventually gets to the point that we see him and then his temple fall, basically, and then his exile to Octo. Um, so I think it's just it's interesting to just to always have this openness to some degree when it comes
Yes.
to anything that's new come out, and then decide for yourself, hey, is this something that jives with me? I know that a lot of comics come out, and I think Star Wars comics are the place where a lot of wacky and weird things happen.
Right.
There's there's I'm blanking on the actual arc, but I remember a few years ago there was like the this kind of like force vampire zombie
Yep.
crossover with Dr. Aphra in the main Star Wars line. And
Is that the
that,
Screaming Citadel?
yes, exactly. That's it. And a lot of fans were like, this doesn't jive with my Star Wars, man. I don't think that this happened in between episodes 4 and 5. And if you don't like it, then you don't need to
Right.
read it. You don't need to
Yeah.
revisit it. You can put it on the back of your mind. Um, and all that. And if you don't like a TV show, you don't need to watch it. No one's forcing you to
Yeah.
do it. But also no one's forcing you to go online and hate and spew hate against actors and creators and all that stuff, telling them how much you don't like it. Like just let it go. There's bigger problems in the world than this. And it's
Yeah.
ultimately just be a better person.
And if I could add something to what you were saying about
Please
like
do.
the comic, the Cassian and K2SO comic being discarded or not being checked out by people, like I think that that holds true for everything that's not in the current canon as well. Like I think just
Yes,
because
legend stories
something is
too. Right.
not in the canon doesn't mean it's not worth visiting. And it's very true for Legends, obviously. And at the very least, Lucasfilm is still releasing. Like they'll keep the legend stories in print. The novels,
Yeah.
they had the Essential Legends
I
collection
love
that
that
you can
line.
go and
Yeah.
buy. And then the comic books have all been re-released too, and the old Legends comics have been released in these nice collected editions. But then there's other stuff too that was never canon that you can go and read and enjoy. And just because it's not part of that main timeline doesn't mean it's not a good story. We've also got
Absolutely.
stuff like Star Wars Visions that we mentioned earlier, which is not part of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
canon, but it's still great storytelling. So yeah, I think Star Wars can be a lot of different things, and I enjoy most of it.
That's right. That's right. It's a buffet. It's a great buffet, and you can pick the
Buffet,
things
yeah,
that you
great
want
way to put it.
today, and there's a lot of
Yeah,
different flavors and tastes on the buffet too, right? I think it's interesting to note that we just got Andor, which is arguably the most mature adult thing, and then for a live action sense, we just got Skeleton Crew just before it,
yeah,
which is about a bunch of kids going off into the galaxy, and that arguably might be the most to the other extreme of most
yes,
kid friendly live action Star
right,
Wars thing in the
yep.
canon. So it's great to have a mixture of both. Don't make it all one tone and thing, and you're gonna reach a wide audience across the board.
Yep, couldn't have said it better myself.
Wonderful. Well, Mike, this has been a fantastic conversation, re-looking at Rogue One and re-examining it, recontextualizing it, thinking through different lenses and angles as a result of Andor Season 2. Mike, where can the folks find you online and if they want to continue the conversation any further?
So I write all about Star Wars, pretty much everything that comes out over at laughingplace.com. And then my podcast is called Who's the Bossk, and that is released through Laughing Place. We just reached our 5th anniversary this past
Oh, congratulations.
February. Thank you. Yeah, so we're a little over 5 years old at this point, and getting up to maybe I think it's like 230 episodes next week. So,
Wow. Great.
um, yeah, very proud of that. I got to be a part of the Holonet news stage at Star Wars Celebration for 2 events running with my
Congrats on that too.
podcast and all that.
Hey,
Yeah,
congrats
thanks
all
a lot.
around.
By the way, I'd love to have you on my show at some point.
Anytime. I'm
If
I'm generally
find
always available. So
find something you want to talk about, and we'll bring you on there. But yeah, other than that, I consume a lot of media, and I like talking about it. But those are the places that you can find me.
Fantastic. Yeah, go check out Who's the Boss, folks. It's a wonderful podcast. You will not regret it. A lot of
Thank
great
you.
discussions here, and excited to see where the show goes with the weeks after, when you have to think through, like, okay, what's this topic
Yeah.
of this week? That's where I think the a lot of podcasts get really interesting, when it's not the, like,
Right,
okay,
right.
Andor season 2 part 1 episode or something like that, right? Where all the podcasts talk about the same thing each and every week,
Yeah,
when they're forced to think outside the box a little bit about things, and talk through different thematic things, or go to the books or comics or just other things in the Star Wars galaxy. I
yeah.
always find that to be a really fun time. So excited to see where your journey goes over the next couple of weeks here, and thank you so much, Mike, for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts, insights, and opinions on Andor and Rogue One too.
Sure, and just that leads me to plug a very specific thing, though, because Andor has ended and we're struggling to find stuff to talk about. In a couple weeks, we are going to be talking about Tony Gilroy's movie, Michael Clayton, which is not Star Wars related,
Ooh,
but it
there
is
you go.
Tony Gilroy. I remember seeing it in the theater when it came out, but I haven't watched it since. So, just kind of give a little insight on like what his creative stuff is like outside of Andor. But yes, thank you so much, Anthony, for having me on the show, and thank you for letting me plug my own podcast.
Oh, of course. Definitely looking forward to the Michael Clayton of it all. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And folks, thank you very much for listening to this episode. We'll be back, of course, next week with a brand new episode in the Forest Ghost Conversations canon. Now, I think next week we're going back to our Revenge of the Sith conversations, so get ready for that. We got part 4 coming up of that. So if you haven't checked out parts 1 through 3, go back into the catalog and check those out. Some great conversations there, but we got some more wonderful goodness coming up very soon here. Until then, may the Force be with you. Take care.